Assalamualaikum guys, this is Dr. Nida Masroor with another discussion session on research. In our previous sessions, we have already discussed different aspects of research, the importance of research, why do we need to conduct the research, how does it help in how does it assist in policy making, how to identify a research gap, a problem, research problem, what are different kind of research problems that exist, and how can we easily identify them. So these were the things we have already discussed, and most importantly, the different components of research methodology, uh, different kind of researches, variables, all those components that are technical aspects that needs to be discussed in a comprehensive overview of research methodology we have discussed in our previous sessions. Uh, in the current session, in this particular session, what we are going to discuss, what are we going to discuss, and how is it different from the rest of our topics? Being a researcher, you all know that uh, understanding the research components is not the only problem, or defining your own research problem and conducting research on that particular topic is not the only thing that needs to be evaluated and that needs to be addressed. Rather, how are you going to analyze and report that particular data to your audience, to your um, readers? That is also a very important aspect. Keep this thing in mind. A researcher has to make it easier for the readers to understand the research problem, to get an overview and insight of that thing, and to easily comprehend the whole data. The research writing itself has its own technical aspects, and that's what we are going to discuss in our today's session. First of all, we need to discuss the basic components of a research paper or the thesis outline. That is, the first and the foremost important thing is defining the title of research. Keep this thing in mind that your title should clearly indicate the nature of research, and it will automatically define a roadmap for the research methodology. It should clearly state the relation between the variables and what you are going to do in your research. A brief and comprehensive statement that clearly outlines the roadmap, that clearly outlines the context of your research. These are the key points that needs to be that needs to be kept in mind while defining the title of your research. The next comes is the abstract of research. It is a kind of summary that comprises of your whole research, and it gives the readers an idea what the research is all about. Every component every component that is addressed in the research should be made a part of your abstract to give a clear idea to the readers what they are going to read, what are they going to find in the research. Next comes the standard 5 chapters: the introduction, literature review, research methodology, data analysis, and conclusion. So what are we going to study in these particular chapters? Usually in the research, we used to follow the deductive approach of reporting, defining the research methodology and understanding the facts and figures. The same approach is going to be followed in reporting those facts in your research paper. An introduction, and one more thing, as we have discussed earlier, that it's It's not only important to conduct a research on a certain topic, but it's also very much important to understand how to report all those facts to your readers, to your audience. Because once you get into research, research is like an ocean where you get to know a lot of facts, where you get to gather a lot of fact, figures, information. And at times it happens that you clearly get lost in the in that uh, ocean of data, and you don't know which particular information to be placed where and which particular information to be uh, reported where. So it also happens that when you encounter that kind of problem, it happens that either you skip the most important details, or most of the time it also happens that people used to repeat the same kind of information again and again, where that should not be the case. There should be a clear distinction between each and every heading that is addressed in your research paper, and you should clearly distinguish, differentiate the type of data what are you going to place and under certain head. So in introduction part, the most important aspect of the introduction part is to provide the research gap. It establish the ground for conducting the research. It highlights the importance of research. It identifies the research problem and research rationale as well. What is research rationale? That is the reason behind conducting any kind of research. It should clearly report the reason behind conducting any kind of research. It should clearly report the statement of your problem. It should clearly report what are you going to find in particular research, that is the research objectives. And it should also highlight the importance, significance of that research, or as well as the scope of that particular research, like where, to what extent you can apply the same results to different scenarios. So all these things should be addressed in your introduction chapter. It should clearly establish the ground for conducting research, and it should clearly define, clearly set the ground for on the chapters that are going to be discussed onwards, that is the literature review. So in introduction part, that usually covers not only the research problem, but also a bit of researchers' own opinions, their own verdict about the research. It contains certain amount of uh, citations. Obviously, citations and references are very much important in reporting the research and reporting facts in research. However, to some extent, you can include your own opinion, the observations, different kind of observations by the researcher to establish the ground for research. Next chapter is the literature review. In the slides that are coming onwards, we are going to discuss the components of each and every chapter in complete detail. However, we are right now having an overview. And then after the introduction, the next chapter is literature review. As the name indicates, there you are going to provide the review of literature, the past literature, the secondary data that is already being published on that particular topic. And in this particular chapter, you are going to not only report the theoretical background, that is the theories that covers academic theories and conceptual theories that reports the facts related to that particular area, but also you are going to report the empirical studies, uh, the studies that were conducted, the similar kind of studies that were conducted in different parts of the world, and the results that are provided by them in order to better understand the research in the real world, in the context of research in the real world. Next chapter is the research methodology, the technical aspect of your research. It covers all the technical tools and components that are going to be used in order to conduct your particular research. That comprises every tool, every step you have followed in conducting your research has to be reported in this particular chapter. And this is the most technical, this is actually the most technical chapter, that particular chapter that contains the most technical details related to research. It contains from where you are going to gather data, which kind of data you are going to be used, what are different kind of variables, what are data sources, uh, which particular methodology you're going to you're going to use for defining your sample, what is your population, the sample, uh, and how are you going to define the sample size, how you're going to identify the sample size, which particular method is going to be used. And obviously, every component you're going to define is based on certain logical reasoning that clearly provide the justification for your research methodology. After conducting after going through after going through the practical aspect of that research and following the research methodology in order to gather the data and in order to gather the information you required for proving your hypothesis, the next chapter is the data analysis and discussion, where you're going to report your findings, your contribution in research, what you have identified, what you have gathered from the whole context, and what will be the contribution of your research in actual world. Next, the last but not the least is the conclusion and recommendation. In this particular chapter, you don't not only conclude the research which you have conducted so far, but you also provide the future grounds, recommendations for the policymakers, and also the future prospects of the research. What are the unidentified components that needs to be researched in further studies? Keep this thing in mind that every component cannot be found out in a single kind of research, in a single research. And research should be focused enough to help assist in policy making. The more broader the context, the more difficult it would be to provide the ground, to provide the grounds for assistance in policy making. Now, moving on towards the next slide, that is the first chapter of our research. And this is one of the most important chapters, that is the introduction. In the introduction chapter, as we have discussed earlier, that you clearly have to define not only the research rationale, the research problem, but also the rationale behind conducting that particular research. So obviously, the data, the facts that are going to be reported under this particular chapter, in this particular chapter, should be clearly distinguished with each other. The first heading in this particular chapter is background of the study. One thing we should keep in mind, that there are different outlines that are provided by different researchers and different countries. That is different kind of outlines are being followed. Even in institutions, the universities, they provide different kind of outlines and different kind of heads that it will be provided. However, like some includes aims of the study, and some include some other headings as well. However, despite the content of the heading, despite the wording of the heading, this these are the contents that should be included in your first chapter, included in your introduction chapter. The first heading is the background of the study. In background of the study, in this particular head, you have to follow the deductive approach. You have to create a scenario. You have to create a ground for your research. What is the reason, what is the actual problem you have identified, what is the actual problem you have observed from the real world, what are the ground for ground or that define uh, the importance of different components, that define the importance of the variables selected. For example, if you are conducting a research on, like, any two variables, say the reasons of food inflation all over the world. So, obviously, the reason behind the food inflation all over the world. So, in that case, or uh, the effect of a certain uh, like natural disasters and its effect on food inflation. So in that case, if we have the title clearly gives an idea of two variables, in that case you have to clearly set grounds. What are we talking about? Natural disasters refer to what, and how is it like how is it being the topic of a study? How it becomes the topic of a study? So two variables should be clearly defined. Their grounds in the real world should be clearly defined. Food inflation, what is its context? Why we are addressing this particular issue? What is the importance of that particular issue? These things should be clearly mentioned in background of the study. And generally, you start from the global context or from the broad perspective, and you gradually narrow down your topics toward a certain aspect. And when you reach that particular point where you are focused enough on your specific variables, then you are going to specifically, although that is already being addressed in your background of the study, in that particular heading, gradually when the readers will move on from the starting till the end, they are going to get an idea of what is going to be discussed later. In the end, uh, they will have a clear picture of what is going to be the research topic. In problem statement, however, in statement of the problem or the problem statement, you clearly outline the problem under separate head in order to give it an emphasis, in order to highlight it separately. So in case if certain readers, certain audience wants to uh, jump to that particular problem statement, they will get an idea what this research is all about. Next is the significance of the study. Obviously, as the name indicates, it highlights the importance of the study, the contribution of the research. It's going to the contribution of the research in the real world. How is it going to assist the policymakers, the managers, the government officials, all the stakeholders, even the customers, or as we are discussing currently, uh, the topics related to management sciences. How are they going to help out different stakeholders, the academicians as well, and the managers, the government officials, and different policymakers. This thing needs to be discussed in significance of the study. Another heading, scope of research. People often confuse between these two headings, the significance of the study and scope of research, whereas these should be clearly distinguished. The significance covers the importance of the study, however, scope of research covers to what extent you are going to apply the results of uh, the research findings in different kind of scenarios or situations. For example, if I'm going to conduct a particular research in a specific state or in a specific city, to what extent I can apply the same results to different parts of the country or to different parts of the world. Obviously, the grounds for the application of those results based on the similarities between the environments of those vicinities. So we need to understand scope of research, or if we are conducting research on a particular sector, to what extent uh, those results can be applied to different sectors. The next heading, again, keep this thing in mind. This is all uh, a kind of deductive approach. We have established from the broad perspective towards, we narrow down the perspective to a specific problem in the background of the study. Then comes the problem statement, where we addressed specifically the problems in few lines in a paragraph or so, and in significance of the study, we specifically highlight the importance of that particular study to different stakeholders, to different policymakers separately, how it's going to assist the policymakers, how it's going to assist the managers, how it's going to assist in the academicians, was whatsoever. The scope of research, clearly, the scope should be separately, it should be mentioned to what extent we are going to apply the results to different scenarios. Then comes the research questions, and obviously we are going to deduct the these the information for these heads from the initially discussed material. Research questions clearly reports the question to be addressed in that particular paper or thesis or research. Generally, we used to identify 1 to 3 to 5 research questions based on the level of your research. For example, if I'm going to write a research paper, the number of questions appropriate for a simple kind of research paper should be 1 to 2 or maximum to 3. Whereas in case if you are going to discuss the thesis, that gradually increases, but not the research questions should not exceed a certain point where it becomes difficult for a researcher to cover all those aspects in a single study, one thing, and it becomes cumbersome for the readers to get a clear distinction. How is it going to assist them in their policy making? So research questions should clearly, briefly, every question should be stated separately. In the research objectives, that is somehow the when you whatever you are going to find out, the way you are reporting the research questions is the interrogative form, whereas in research objectives you are going to report it in an affirmative form, in the declarative form. For example, in research question, if you are going to discuss, like if you have developed a research question, what are the reasons behind, what are the factors that contribute to inflation in the country? in that case, the research objective will be, that will complement that particular question, will be to identify the factors that contribute to inflation in the country. So that is just the difference is just uh, about the reporting of that thing. So in research question, that is interrogative form, whereas in research objective, that should clearly uh, state the objective of research in an affirmative or declarative form. Lastly, you're going to research some authors include this particular heading in the last chapter, or in the in some scenarios you include this particular heading in the first chapter, that is the limitation of this study. These are the barriers or hurdles that are going to be that are going to make the research difficult, that are going to make the gathering of data difficult for the researcher. So at times, for example, if uh, you are going to address a sensitive topic in your research, and you feel that getting the data uh, from certain audience is not going to be possible, that will be included. Those things will be included in the limitation of the study. It also includes the factors that that restricts the data gathering, the factors that limits the scope of research as well. For example, in some cases, it happens that due to time limitation, due to financial constraints, your sample size is too narrow. And you know it very well that increasing the size of your sample will improve the research results, will improve the authenticity of the research. So you mentioned all those things in your limitation of the study, that due to time frame or due to the financial constraints or difficulty in data gathering, the sample size is kept at this kept this much limited. However, increasing the size of that particular sample will improve the quality of your research results as well. So that was all about chapter one, the introduction part, and we will continue it the other time, inshallah, with the next chapter, that is going to be the literature review. Till then, uh, try your level best to come up with uh, a brief outline of what you are going to conduct research on. What should be the research rationale? What should be the research problem you're going to discuss in your research paper or your thesis? Wish you all the very best of luck for your research endeavors, and see you next time. Take care. Goodbye. Allah Hafiz.